It's on?
Yep.
Welcome. Would you please take your seats? So we'd like to begin. Thank you. In the absence of our president, Mary Vivaldi, I happen to be the vice president this year, and Ursula, that's my name, to think about it. Anyway, I would like to welcome everybody to this program. I think you're going to enjoy it, of course. All of our programs are enjoyable. And of course, we would love you to check out our sale table, as well as refreshments. And I would like to tell you that next month, June 10th, we have a very special program called the Nelson Fairbank Diaries from 1870 to 1880. And we were very fortunate that a woman in Dedham, I believe, found these and gave them to the Historical Society several years ago. And thanks to people like Ernie Beer and Sally Barrett, who will be presenting the program, we will be able to have as it says, an entertaining window into the daily life of a skilled mason. So we hope you will come next June 10th. It will also be the annual meeting and election of officers, very briefly. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our curator, archivist, and new town historian, Lee Swanson, who will tell you about Jacob Bigelow, Jr.
Thank you, Ursula. Is Ernie Beer here? No, he's not here. Ernie Beer started this project a number of years ago because he discovered Jacob Bigelow through some side research. And, okay. And we have a gravestone that's out in the Revolutionary War Cemetery for Reverend Jacob Bigelow, and as you see from this picture, that there are stones lying on the ground that are the original stones, and it has a beautiful inscription on the stones that are lying on the ground, and it tells the story in memory of this is the one on the right, in memory of Reverend Jacob Bigelow, pastor of the church and congregation in Sudbury, Bonn, March 2nd, 1743, graduated at Harvard, and ordained as a minister, and became the minister at First Parish in 1772 after the death of Israel Loring. And it is a beautiful stone, and hopefully someday it can be standing up, because it really should be standing up, but perhaps there's Bigelow descendants that are here. Are there any Bigelow descendants that have come today? Okay. Well, I'm just passing the word. Maybe the stone should be somehow standing up. But we start the real story with a house that's at 250 Old Sudbury Road. And does anyone know what the connection with Jacob Bigelow is? Okay. Pardon? No. The connection is this is where Jacob Bigelow lived. And it's why some people still call it the parsonage, which is confusing because there's another parsonage on Concord Road. But nevertheless, it is a beautifully restored house. And are the owners here today? Nope. Okay. And they've spent a lot of money and love restoring this house, which is the Jacob Bigelow's house, and it's where Jacob Bigelow Jr. was born. And we have an unusual picture taken from, the best I can tell, in 1920 of what the house looked like. This is shortly after they added all this, and the roof line was quite different. Yet you can see the actual roof over there, but they've added all this. They've added the porches in the what I've learned to be called Swiss Italian style. Don't know who did it, but the proof is there's the same look with the steps. So what hasn't changed are the steps there and the stone wall. And I used to think that this is a house on Concord Road, but it's not. It's the Jacob Bigelow house that they had made stylish, but it is a handsome house today at 250 Old Sudbury Road. It was designed by J. Thompson for Reverend Jacob Bigelow and built in 1773. Who restored it the first time around was Bob Desjardins, who some of you may remember, a great local self-trained architect, and that's where he lived. And so he did the first restoration that I'm familiar with. But Jacob Bigelow Sr. had the luck of having a wife who was married very well, and he married very well, and her family had a large mansion on Hanover Street in Boston. So he brought in money with the marriage, and then later on, someone else, one of the children, gets even more involved in a famous family. So the next time you drive by this is right opposite the Methodist Church. Just go a little bit slow. Don't tie up the traffic, but it is really a remarkable house. And here is the man we're telling the story about. Very stern, the Jacob Bigelow Jr. And if you, I recently ran into people who say that his name was not Junior, but here we had Jacob Bigelow, and what are you going to call the son? It's the same name. So we know him as Jacob Bigelow Jr. And he was a remarkable man that graduated from Harvard. We know very little about his life here, but he graduated from Harvard in 1806. Went to the University of Pennsylvania, earning an MD in 1810. He practiced medicine by himself for a year without much financial success. It was very difficult to start a practice back in 1810 without working with somebody else, because the practice of medicine really didn't exist. They were inventing it, and he finally went into practice with Dr. James Jackson in 1811. And the following year, he lectured on botany at Harvard with W.B. Peck, and the interest shown in his lectures led him to compile a book, one of many on botany. But here is Harvard. It's nothing wrong with your eyes. I just couldn't get a good picture of Harvard back then. Harvard has, actually those buildings are still there at Harvard, but he did graduate, and the problem with being a doctor in the time span that he was, 1810 going on, as I say, they're really inventing the practice of medicine, And he found himself opposing bloodletting, which was a common practice then, just as George Washington is said to have died from bloodletting. But that was the belief at the time in 1799 when George Washington was dying, to let off some blood. I still sort of believe in it because I give blood 4 times a year. So that's similar. But there's a benefit to that.
It's keeping you healthy, right?
Yes, I think so, yes. But here is a portrait of a doctor trying to figure out what to do for a poor child, and this is the problem of early medicine, that you had to diagnose something that, and you had very little to work by. And then he got sidetracked a little bit after becoming a doctor. His great interest in botany, and he published this book, The Plants of Boston, in 1814, and it led to, and it's just about the plants of Boston, and there's no illustrations, but at this early date he got interested in how you could have a book with illustrations. The technology did not exist. And this is an interesting preface. During the very flattering attendance which for the last and the present season has been bestowed on the botanical lectures in this place, and the prevailing taste which has been manifested for the study of plants, it was impossible not to feel the great inconvenience arising from the deficiency of botanical books. There wasn't any. There were no botanical books, especially with illustrations. And the common standard works of the science, those containing the genera and the species of plants, are hardly so much as heard of by a name in our bookstores. These works, even when obtained, being principally in Latin, are useless to a great class of amateurs of the science, who are not conversant in the learned languages. To this it may be added that a great number of American plants have never been fully described. This is 1814, that all that is known concerning them is contained in the few words of a specific character, which in the student or inexperienced botanist can hardly afford a necessary degree of satisfaction and certainty. So later on, he published the first book and then did another book. So he did a series of 4 books of plant botany of specifically New England, Boston mostly. So here is, I can't make that out, but, you can see the nut on the right-hand side. That's a, no botanist here, horse chestnut. And that's an unusual way of showing the nut, because it's not easily understood what that is, but it's a cutaway of the nut. Versus this is your favorite springtime tonic, skunk cabbage. And Bill Andreas, he's here today, he told an interesting story about skunk cabbage has its own furnace. Is that right, Bill? And that it produces heat on its own, and that has only recently been discovered. And that is why when you go into a swamp with skunk cabbage poking up through the ice and the snow, that's why, because it has its own inbuilt little furnace. So I think we can learn a lot more about skunk cabbage. Might even be edible or something. And this was bloodroot. So he made these illustrations for one of his series of books on botany. He illustrated them. These are his drawings. And because he had so many problems printing them with the technology of the time, this is it's a tree, and that flower makes you think it's something else, but it's a tree, hemlock. And some of his illustrations are, they're not the hemlock we know today, but, and this is Bigelow, it's as a fruit. I guess I should have put labels on them, but I thought they'd show up better. This is, pardon? Mountain laurel, okay. The interesting thing is that he's put the Latin name on it, but not the English name, and he complains about that in public, that there's no English names. Gentian, thank you. And so he's because he had these problems in doing a study of a plant and then having it produced, he got very interested in how plates are made and helped to create a whole brand new way for what is called a color aqua tint process that you print via. And he did these books up until 1824. But at that same time, he is doing many other things. He's a professor at In 1815, he became professor of materia medica at Harvard Medical School. In 1816, he was appointed Rumford Professor of Application of Science to the Useful Arts at Harvard College. And if you know anything about Count Rumford, a fascinating man, I wish he had come through Sudbury. We could tell his story someday, but I don't know that he ever did. But he was Jacob Bigelow Jr. was the Rumford professor. The useful arts are what we now call technology. The word technology has its origins in the 17th century, but Bigelow is credited with lifting the term out of obscurity and being the first to popularize its use, both in his lectures and in a book of collected lectures, Elements of Technology, published in 1829. And now, I happen to love sassafras because, one, when I had a wholesale business, I was told I was the largest buyer of sassafras in the country. And I sold it, it's the inner bark of the root, not the outer bark, just the inner bark. So you have to kill the tree to get sassafras. Oh, not there, okay. And I sold it to country stores and health food stores across the country. And sadly, in 1970, the United States government declared that if you drank root beer with sassafras, bark of sassafras in it, if you drank 800 gallons of root beer in a year, you would die of cancer. 800 gallons. So the USDA had me remove all my product from the market, and I couldn't sell sassafras bark. So that dates to when you used to drink root beer before 1970. It tasted so different than it does now because they had to take out the sassafras. And that's the prime ingredient for root beer. But things change. Maybe they'll come back. But
did they use that for sarsaparilla too?
Sarsaparilla was also made out of real sassafras. Well, looks like an iris to me, but what's that one? I know. This is a tobacco plant. We had a lot of native tobacco plants, and he did a lot of illustrations of them. And this is definitely tobacco. I don't know that he smoked, but So then he had a very good political side to him, Jacob Bigelow Jr. did. He made this as a frontispiece to a book that he published in 1817. He's giving thanks to the man who was actually the president of Harvard University at that time, as you see. And he was, from everything I've read about him, he was very forthright and honest. So he's giving credit to Kirkland, but going on his merry way. That's a member of the Cabbage family. Now, why am I showing a picture of, does anyone recognize him? How do you say his name? Thoreau. And he, Jacob Bigelow has a website and has, he's on Facebook. So if you want to go on Facebook and like him, you may. But he speaks, the man that has put together this very extraordinary website for Jacob Bigelow is really more interested in him, Henry David Thoreau of Concord. And he quotes all through his what becomes a journal, things like this. My first now this is Henry David Thoreau speaking. My first botany, as I remember, was Bigelow's Plants of Boston and Vicinity, which I began to use about 20 years ago, looking chiefly for the popular names and the short references to localities of plants, even without any regard to the plant. I also learned the names of many, but without using any system, and forgot them soon. I was not inclined to pluck flowers, preferred to leave them where they were, liked them best there. I was never in the least interested in plants in the house, but from year to year we look at nature with new eyes. About half a dozen years ago, I found myself attending to plants with more method, looking out the name of each one and remembering it. I began to bring them home in my hat. You ever seen the illustration of Henry David Thoreau, or the photograph? He has this huge, tall hat. That was his, as he calls it, his botany collection. Or his botany box. I never used any other, and when someone whom I visited was evidently surprised at its dilapidated look as I deposited on their front entry table this straw hat, huge thing, I assured them it was not so much my hat as my botany box. I remember gazing with interest at the swamps about those days and wondering if I could ever attain to such familiarity with plants that I should know the species of every twig and leaf in them, that I should be acquainted with every plant excepting grasses and cryptogrammativous ones. Summer and winter that I saw, though I knew most of the flowers, and there were not in any particular swamp more than a half dozen shrubs that I did know, yet these made it seem like a maze to me of 1,000 strange species. And I even thought of commencing at one end and looking at it faithfully and laboriously through till I knew it all. I little thought that in a year or two I should have attained to that knowledge with all that labor. Still, I never studied botany. So Henry David Thoreau learns a great deal by the work of Jacob Bigelow. And then we come to the word technology. Fairly new word coined by Jacob Bigelow, Harvard in the 1820s. Technology, Greek, art, craft, and skill, or logos, knowledge, text, Indo-Euro. Weave or fabricate, meaning. Technologies are developed to help us do something we otherwise couldn't do. Our ability to create technology sets us apart from other animals. Beavers build dams and chimps use sticks, but no animal comes close to humans in our ability to extend our natural environment through technology. Reliance on technology is as old as the human race. It shapes us, and at the same time is shaped by us. And he gets interested in this because first he because he couldn't have colored plates for his books, and he learned that technology and encouraged that technology in Boston. He got interested in the whole field of technology, so he is in 1840, under the title of The Useful Arts Considered in Connection with the Application of Science, it was the first word that brought the technology into familiar use. Now, if he hadn't done that, because that place in Cambridge, which is called MI, what is that last word? Wouldn't have been perhaps called MIT, because he invented it. He made it popular in 1840s, and they didn't come about until 1860s to create MIT. So he really was fantastic in his ability to do all these things and write so many books on so many subjects. And I wish we could find out more about him in this town, because here he was born in 1787, and we know so little. But perhaps another program on it takes a long while to search out these things, so maybe another program. But he was an American Academy of Arts and Sciences president for over almost 20 years. He went to the Mass General Hospital and encouraged them on not doing bloodletting and many other things, including, well, there's another plant. Oh, this is sassafras, by the way. I'm lucky that behind where I live is 3 sassafras trees, and they give no odor, they give no scent until you kill it and take the root and take the inner bark, but I'm not going to do that. But it's a fascinating tree because it's all the same tree, yet it can have 3 different appearances of the leaf. But this is what he got involved with. It's the first giving of ether in an operation. He was one of the doctors involved and is given credit for different aspects of first using ether. And this is very few pictures exist of Jacob Bigelow. I don't know why, if the family has retained them or what, but a stern man in the 3 pictures I've ever found of him. Then he got involved in, when he thought up these ideas, he wasn't satisfied with just thinking about it. He did something about it. So he's co-creator of Mount Auburn Cemetery. And of course, Mount Auburn their magazine is named after what they used to call it, the kids from Harvard, before it was a cemetery, and they used to call it Sweet Auburn, because it had all these nooks and crannies of hill and vale and wonderful hideaways, places, and they started to purchase that land along with Dr. Story, Judge Story, and set up a committee to create a cemetery. And his thinking was that bodies should not be buried in a church underneath the floor for sanitary reasons. They should not be just put any willy-nilly area. They should be honored. And so this is Mount Auburn Cemetery, which is in Cambridge, Watertown border, is the first garden cemetery in the world, and very quickly it was copied by many other cities in this country and then Europe. But this is a unusual look of the Mount Auburn when it was first created, and they later filled that in. But that's the price you pay with a cemetery. The demand goes up and they need more land, and They have 175 acres now, but they started with 70, and they're still acquiring. But it is a wonderful place to just to calm down and walk around and read the different inscriptions and all the very famous people that are buried there. And this is a modern view of it. I know Mount Auburn because I used to go in there every February 27th for Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's birthday, which is the stone way in the back is, I believe, is Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's gravesite when I worked at the Wayside Inn. And we had a group of about 50 people assembled for a ceremony at his gravesite at Mount Auburn Cemetery. And it's February 27th, anything can happen. And guess what? It snowed every single time I went in there, which is just perfect because that's what he's describing, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow describing one of his poems. So it was fitting that it snowed just for us. But this is Jacob Bigelow when he was at Mass General. He prompted them on modern technology, using modern technology and techniques, and there is a wing named after him. This bust is, as you see in the background, it has screening around it. Well, they take him off display because they're building so much at Mass General, and so he's in and out of display. But his bust is still there. Mount Auburn Cemetery has many busts of him that were created. But so here we have the original view of the entrance, which is described as Greek Egyptian. It's a huge entrance, 25 feet in height, and sadly made for carriages of the time, and they've had to do some interesting work to get modern vehicles in there. But this was designed by Jacob Bigelow. His idea, carried it forth, got the support of the other trustees of Mount Auburn Cemetery, and it shows this when Henry Wadsworth Longfellow passed on. There was something like 400,000 people that showed up that day, which is too many for the cemetery. But it was an incredible gathering of people to remember Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And this is a modern view of what the entranceway. I've yet to find out why he was so entranced with this design. It looks to me, driving by it on Mount Auburn Street, it looks like a control tower for an airport. I mean, it's all granite, Quincy granite, but it's, Jacob got his way. And then he got his way sort of with this statue. He had it commissioned, and it shows a sphinx, but not with a normal sphinx like eagle face and all. Very, very nice looking lady. And he had this made, placed it there, and then tried to do, from what the stories at Mount Auburn say, he tried to do a fundraising to pay himself back. Didn't go. So he gave it to the Mount Auburn Cemetery. So there's no one buried there. It's just one of the statues to contemplate, and people do.
Lee,
Yes?
that sphinx has its haunches facing an avenue that goes up to this chapel.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, as time went on, the good women of Boston were offended by these.
The butt end, Mimi.
Yes, and the horticulturalists contrived that things grow about
Mhm.
the back of this sphinx. So
Evergreen,
for about 100 years, the sphinx was half hidden.
right.
And finally, about 15, 20 years ago, the powers that be decided the time had come to show the whole sphinx. Everything was taken down, new plantings all around the chapel, and now people who drive up to see the chapel from that angle
Right.
are faced with the whole, the whole sphinx.
The whole Sphinx and nothing but the Sphinx. Thank you. Maybe. Which brings up something. How many people have ever been to Mount Auburn Cemetery? Raise your hand, please. Good showing. Those who haven't should. Not to find a final resting place, just to see this place. It is incredible. And dear old Jake's love of his life. And because he had a family, he had a large family. This wasn't the only thing he did. He had a lot of children. But this, from a distance, is... Get that one, huh? This is a distant shot of what is now called Bigelow Chapel, but in visiting Mount Auburn, I was informed it didn't get named until 1930, along with the other chapel, which is named after Judge Story. That didn't get named until 1930. But the important thing about this is Jacob Bigelow designed it. Now, he's an architect, he's a botanist, he's a technologist, incredible, anything. And this is Ernie Beer's girlfriend standing with her back to you there. Can hardly see her there, but anyway. It is a beautiful structure, but it does have a Disneyland-like appearance, though. It's wild looking, and it's on top of a hill, beautifully situated, whereas Story Chapel is right near the entrance. And different lighting have different effects on it. But it has a sad story because when it was commissioned in the 1840s, who else builds granite things but people from Quincy?